Sometimes, the wildest moments come when you least expect them. Elena Torres knew storms in the Nevada desert could be brutal, but she never imagined the storm that would change her life forever. It started with the kind of thunder that rattled windows and woke you from the deepest sleep, the kind that seemed to shake the bones of the earth itself. The wind howled through the old boards of Elena's small ranch house, and rain battered the metal roof so hard it was impossible to ignore. She sat up in bed, heart pounding. The storm outside was more than just noise. It was a living thing, pressing in on her world. Elena listened for Luna, her loyal German shepherd, who always slept at the foot of her bed. The dog was up already, pacing nervously, ears pinned back. Then came a sound that didn't belong to any storm, something high-pitched, wild, desperate. A frantic whinny, sharp and terrified, slicing through the wind and rain. Elena's instincts, forged from years as a firefighter, kicked in instantly. She grabbed her heavy flashlight, yanked on her boots, threw a rain slicker over her pajamas, and slipped on leather gloves by the door. The old farmhouse groaned as she pushed out into the storm. Luna at her side, the wind nearly knocked her over. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the desert landscape in stark white flashes. There was the corral, the sagging barn, and beyond them, the endless open range. The whinnying came again, louder this time, filled with pain and panic. "Easy! Easy!" Elena called, her voice almost lost in the roar of wind. She moved toward the fence, boots squelching in the mud. Luna dashed ahead, barking, nose pointed out into the darkness. That's when Elena saw the horse, a wild mustang, stark white against the gloom, struggling near the far edge of her property where barbed wire had come loose. The animal was tangled, legs thrashing, body slick with blood and rain. Its eyes rolled white with terror every time lightning flashed. Each movement only made the wire cut deeper. Elena approached slowly, keeping her flashlight low. Hey, easy there, boy. I'm not going to hurt you," she said, trying to keep her voice calm. She saw now how bad it was. The wire looped around one front leg and across the chest, already biting deep. The horse's flanks heaved. She could see the muscles trembling. The raw fight for survival. No halter, no brand she recognized. Just a jagged old scar on his shoulder. He belonged to no one and everyone, the desert's own spirit. She set her flashlight in the mud, beam shining up into the rain. Thunder boomed again, and the horse jerked, nearly throwing itself down. Elena dropped to her knees, hands out. "Shh, I'm right here. You're going to be all right. I promise you." She felt the adrenaline in her veins, the fine line between courage and foolishness. Getting close to a panicked wild horse was no joke, but there was no time for fear. Working by feel more than sight, she found the worst snarl of barbed wire and started to untwist it. Her gloves tore, the wire digging into her own skin, but Elena barely noticed. Luna stood guard, barking at every rumble of thunder. "It's okay, boy. I got you. Just breathe. Just breathe." The horse struggled, head tossing, but something in Elena's steady hands, or maybe her words, kept him from kicking. Bit by bit, she loosened the wire, whispering the whole time about nothing and everything. Her old job, her husband who died in a fire, the lonely years since. She wasn't sure why she told him these things. Maybe she just needed to remind herself she was still alive, still capable of saving something. Finally, with a last desperate tug, the wire snapped free. The mustang staggered forward, nearly knocking Elena over. She fell in the mud, chest heaving, as the horse shuddered in place, rain pouring off his back. For a heartbeat, they stared at each other, woman and wild thing, both shaking from adrenaline. Then the horse bolted a few steps, slipping in the mud, but didn't run far. Instead, he stood, trembling, nostrils flared, watching her with huge, dark eyes. Elena pushed herself to her feet, hands bloody and raw. "It's okay. I'm not going to chase you. You're safe, at least for now." The storm raged on. Elena realized she couldn't leave him out here. He was hurt, and if the storm didn't get him, coyotes might. She stepped back, speaking softly. "Come on, let's get out of this mess." She moved slowly, inch by inch, never turning her back, and the mustang, to her amazement, followed. It took nearly an hour to coax him across the slick ground and into the old barn. The whole time, Elena kept up her one-sided conversation, talking about the firehouse back in Reno, about the people she missed, about how sometimes you had to make your own family in this world. Luna herded from behind, tail wagging cautiously. Inside, the barn felt like a haven. Elena grabbed a clean blanket, threw it over the Mustang's back, and worked by lantern light to clean the worst of his wounds. The horse flinched but didn't fight, as if he understood she was trying to help. When the adrenaline finally faded, Elena realized how exhausted she was, physically, emotionally, utterly spent. She leaned against the stall door, watching as the Mustang, still unnamed in her mind, stood quiet, battered but alive. Outside, the storm was dying down. First light began to filter through the cracks in the boards. Elena smiled, a soft, tired smile. "You made it, boy. We both did. Guess we're stuck with each other now, huh?" As the sun rose over the Nevada desert, painting the clouds gold and pink, Elena felt something shift inside her, a glimmer of hope she hadn't felt in years. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for tonight, the Mustang was safe and so was she. The Nevada sun was barely up when Elena felt the uneasy sensation of being watched. The desert had a way of making you paranoid. Every distant dust cloud, every glint of metal on the horizon could mean trouble or nothing at all. But this morning, the feeling was more than just nerves. Luna was already at the window, hackles raised, a low growl rumbling deep in her chest. Elena stepped onto her porch, steaming mug of coffee in hand, and scanned the long, rutted driveway. The storm had left everything slick and shining, but the silence felt heavier than usual. Then, in the distance, a sleek black SUV crested the rise, moving far too smoothly for these roads. It was out of place, too polished for the battered pickups and rusted ranch trucks that usually rolled through. She watched as it slowed near the gate, tinted windows reflecting the early light. Elena set her coffee aside and called Luna to her heel. She made sure her muddy boots and the tired lines on her face sent the right message. She wasn't someone who'd be easily bullied. The SUV rolled to a stop. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the driver's door opened, and a woman stepped out. Mid-40s, angular features, dark hair pulled back tight, and a tailored gray suit that looked like it belonged in a courtroom, not the desert. The woman walked with practiced confidence, eyes sharp behind mirrored sunglasses. "Elena Torres?" the woman called. Her voice clipped, official. Elena nodded, arms crossed. "That's right? You lost?" The woman ignored the question and flashed a badge, too quickly for Elena to catch the details. "I'm Agent Lorraine Keller, Bureau of Land Management. I'm here on official government business. There's a Mustang on your property, white, male, unbranded, except for a mark on the left shoulder. We have reason to believe he's the property of a federal research program. I'll need you to turn the animal over immediately." Luna bristled at Elena's side, sensing her tension. Elena forced herself to breathe slow and even. "You have paperwork?" she asked. Keller produced a file folder and handed Elena a few sheets of paper, stamped and signed, but the details were vague. Nothing like the official seizure orders Elena had seen back in her firefighting days. There was no description of the horse's injuries, no official logo, only references to a federal asset and ongoing investigation. The language was intentionally confusing. "This isn't proof," Elena said, handing the papers back. "I don't know what program you're talking about, but that horse nearly died last night tangled in barbed wire. He's hurt. He needs rest, and I'm not letting anybody take him until I see real authorization. Call the sheriff if you want. He knows where to find me." Agent Keller's jaw tightened, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Sometimes helping comes with consequences, Miss Torres. I'd think hard about what you're getting involved in." Elena met her gaze, refusing to look away. "I've thought about it. You're not taking him." Keller tucked the papers away and turned back to her SUV. She paused, sunglasses flashing. "You have a nice day," she said, voice icy, then drove off in a spray of gravel. For a moment, Elena stood perfectly still, letting her pulse settle. The encounter left her rattled. Keller's badge might have been fake, but her intent was clear. Elena knew enough about government doublespeak to know when someone was hiding the truth. Back inside, she checked on Ghost, who'd finally let her get close enough to check the deep wound along his shoulder. The horse watched her, ears swiveling, nostrils flaring every time she touched him. He was still a wild thing, but exhaustion had made him compliant for now. She sent a text to Ruth. "Feds showed up. Woman named Keller. Paperwork looked bogus. She knew about Ghost. Should I be worried?" Ruth responded almost instantly. "Don't give them anything without real proof. I'll call my friend at the Animal Law Center. Hang tight, Elle." The morning dragged on. Elena tried to distract herself with chores, but unease lingered. Ghost grazed in the corral, limping but alert, while Luna paced the fence line as if she, too, could sense trouble brewing. Later that afternoon, the phone rang. Elena picked up, expecting Ruth or the sheriff, but there was only silence on the other end. She hung up, frowning, only for the phone to ring again minutes later. Same silence, same chill creeping up her spine. That night, headlights flickered on the county road. Unfamiliar cars, one white sedan, one battered minivan, sat parked at odd intervals, lights off, engines running. Elena turned off her own lights and watched from the shadows, gripping her old hunting rifle for comfort. The desert was too empty for this kind of attention. She jotted license plates in a notepad, just in case. Ruth called again after midnight. "Elle, I posted about Ghost online. Folks are sharing it, maybe too fast. Don't open the gate for anyone unless I say. And keep your phone charged." Elena chuckled, nerves stretched thin. "What? You think someone's going to try to steal him out from under me?" "Wouldn't put it past them," Ruth replied. "These wild horse stories, they get people riled up. Some for money, some for power. You just take care of yourself." Sleep didn't come easy. Every creak of the old house, every gust rattling the barn roof made Elena sit up and listen. She made rounds with Luna, flashlight beams slicing the darkness, always ending at Ghost's stall. The Mustang would watch her, calm now but wary, as if he sensed they were both in something bigger than they understood. A few hours before dawn, the phone buzzed again. This time a distorted voice. "You made a mistake, Torres. That horse doesn't belong to you." Elena's hands shook, but her reply was steady. "He doesn't belong to you either. Lose this number." When morning finally came, Elena poured herself a stiff cup of coffee, more determined than ever. She was no stranger to standing up to bullies, no matter what badge they flashed. If they wanted Ghost, they'd have to come through her, and this time, she wasn't standing alone. She went outside, and found Ghost standing at the fence, sunlight glinting off his white coat, wounds crusted but healing. Elena leaned on the rail, letting him sniff her hand. "Looks like we've got ourselves a fight, partner. But I'm not backing down, not this time." And as the day broke over the desert, Elena felt the old fire in her chest, fierce, bright, unbreakable. No matter what shadows gathered at her gate, she knew she'd protect Ghost with everything she had. For the first time in months, Elena found herself waking up with purpose. The tension of the previous days, barbed wire rescues, midnight threats, the cold stare of Agent Keller, still buzzed in her veins. But underneath all of it, a fragile new routine was forming. It centered on Ghost, the battered white mustang who paced the corral as the sun climbed over the desert each morning. Elena stepped outside before dawn, mug of coffee warming her hands, boots crunching over the hard-packed earth. The Nevada air was sharp and cool, scented with sage and damp earth from the storm. Luna ran ahead, ears perked, and the old barn creaked as the first rays of sunlight slid across its battered boards. Ghost was waiting, as if he'd known she was coming. He kept his distance, head high, mane tangled and filthy. There was still wildness in his eyes, a flinch in his muscles every time Elena moved too fast, or let the screen door bang behind her. He was healing, but trust was something that had to be earned, one gentle step at a time. Elena set down her coffee and reached for the bucket she'd prepared. A few sweet apples from the last trip to town, a scoop of oats, fresh water from the well. She spoke to him as she worked, keeping her voice steady and calm. "Morning, handsome. I hope you're hungry. You look a little better today. Maybe we'll try the salve again if you let me." The Mustang watched, nostrils twitching, but didn't bolt as she approached. Elena kept her movements slow and deliberate, setting the bucket just inside the corral fence before stepping back to give him space. Ghost inched forward, one cautious hoof at a time, neck stretched long to snatch an apple and dart away, chewing with wary eyes on her the whole time. It became a ritual over the next week. Elena rising with the sun, offering food and gentle words, never forcing contact. Sometimes she'd sit on an old hay bale by the fence, reading aloud from a battered paperback, or just talking about the day ahead. She told Ghost things she hadn't said aloud in years, about her childhood in Reno, about the fire that took her husband, about the ache of loneliness that never quite faded. Strangely, Ghost listened. Maybe it was the steadiness of her voice, or the promise of treats, but little by little his fear softened. He let her touch his nose, then his cheek, and finally, after days of patience, his neck and shoulder. Elena's hands were gentle but sure, cleaning old wounds with warm water and herbal balm, fingers tracing the jagged brand on his left shoulder. She took pictures of the mark and the healing cuts for Ruth's files, careful to document every change. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky orange and purple, Elena lingered at the corral, lost in thought. She remembered the adrenaline of firefighting, the rush of danger, the camaraderie, the knowledge that you could make a difference in a single moment. Life on the ranch was slower, lonelier, but with Ghost, she felt some of that old spark returning. Inside the house, her phone buzzed. A text from Ruth popped up, full of legal jargon and fierce support. "Got your photos? Document everything. If they try anything, we'll be ready. Also, good news. Local animal rescue folks want to help. Sending you info." Elena smiled, feeling the network of support stretching out around her, thin but real, like a safety net beneath a high wire. She shot a quick photo of Ghost nuzzling at the apples and sent it to Ruth. Moments later, her friend replied with a string of heart emojis and a promise to check in again soon. As night fell, Elena settled into her old rocking chair by the window. Luna curled up at her feet. She looked through the photos on her phone, each one a marker of progress. Ghost's eyes a little softer, his coat a little cleaner, the wounds scabbing over and new hair beginning to grow. She'd started a folder labeled Hope, something she hadn't believed in for a long time. Still, the unease lingered. More than once that week, strange cars had driven slowly past the property, their windows too dark to see inside. Unmarked packages showed up at her gate, sometimes empty, sometimes filled with odd junk, as if meant to unnerve her. Elena didn't scare easily, but she kept her rifle close, and every night before bed, she double-checked the locks on the barn. One stormy evening, as thunder grumbled in the distance, Ghost let her run her hands along his flank for the first time without shying away. His muscles quivered, but he didn't bolt, just stood and breathed deep, sides moving against her palm. Elena felt something loosen inside her chest, something old and broken starting to heal. "I lost a lot before I found you," she whispered, smoothing his tangled mane. "My family, my job, my home. You lost something too, didn't you?" She imagined the life Ghost must have lived, racing across open country, surviving by instinct and luck, branded and chased and hurt, but never caught. "But you're not alone anymore. We're in this together." That night, Elena wrote in her battered journal, the words pouring out steady and true. "Trust isn't a gift. It's built in small, stubborn steps. Maybe Ghost will never be tame, but he's teaching me to try again, to reach out, to care even when it hurts." As the wind rattled the windows and rain spattered the roof, she let herself hope that the worst was behind them. Maybe the world was changing, and maybe, just maybe, she could change with it. Days blurred into each other, marked by tiny milestones. Ghost eating from her hand instead of the bucket, standing still as she cleaned a wound, nickering softly when he saw her cross the yard. The fear that had kept them both locked away was slowly giving ground to something warmer, something like trust. And though trouble still brewed beyond the fence line, Elena felt stronger with every sunrise, stronger for having chosen to care, no matter the risks. For the first time in a long time, the future didn't feel empty. It felt like a promise. Some mornings, the desert felt like a cathedral, quiet and wide and washed in gold. After days of tension and watching every shadow, Elena found herself craving the simple comfort of routine. It started before dawn, as the sky shifted from indigo to pale blue and the stars faded one by one. The wind carried the promise of another hot Nevada day. But for these early hours, the world seemed gentle, expectant. Elena slipped outside with her coffee, the mug warm in her hands. She paused on the porch, breathing in the fresh sage and dust, and let her gaze settle on the corral. There Ghost waited, ears perked, the rising sun turning his white coat to silver. The mustang had come to recognize her footsteps, and now, as she approached, he nickered softly, almost a greeting. "Morning, boy," Elena murmured, her voice calm and steady. Luna trotted beside her, tail wagging, sensing the peace of this new day. Elena made a habit of bringing a treat, an apple, a handful of oats, sometimes just a scratch behind the ears if Ghost would allow it. Their ritual was quiet, no sudden movements, just patience and the shared silence of survivors. The days fell into a rhythm that healed more than just Ghost's wounds. After breakfast, Elena would sit by the corral with her second cup of coffee. book in hand or radio playing soft country music from the kitchen window. She read aloud sometimes, snippets of stories and lines of poetry, her voice drifting on the wind. Ghost would listen, occasionally wandering close enough to nuzzle the fence, ears flicking in contentment. Sometimes Elena would work in her small vegetable garden, keeping an eye on Ghost while she weeded rows or watered the squash. She talked to him as she worked, about the weather, about the latest gossip from Ruth, about old memories she'd tucked away for years. Ghost seemed to understand, his presence soothing, never judgmental. For the first time in a long while, Elena began to dream again, not just of getting by, but of building something new. One afternoon, after a particularly gentle morning, Elena snapped a photo of Ghost dozing in the sun, his head low, body relaxed. She sent it to Ruth with a simple message: "He's healing. I think I am too." Ruth's reply came quickly, full of exclamation points and hearts. "People are following Ghost's story. I've got a dozen messages from folks offering support. Feed, donations, even a volunteer or two. Keep sending updates. Community's on your side." Those words warmed Elena more than she expected. She started sharing small moments with Ruth every day. Ghost drinking from the trough, Luna curled up beside the corral, the sky blazing orange at sunset behind the barn. Ruth, in turn, posted updates online, gathering support from animal lovers and neighbors across the county. Elena felt a kind of invisible net gathering under her, holding her up. As the days passed, Ghost grew more confident. His limp faded, and a healthy gleam returned to his coat. He'd follow Elena along the fence line when she moved between chores, watching her with steady eyes. Sometimes, if the wind was just right, he'd nicker at the sound of her voice, a sound that never failed to make Elena smile. She began to introduce little challenges: a brush, first shown from a distance, then brought closer each day until one morning, Ghost allowed her to run it over his back. His skin shivered, but he stood still, trusting her hands. Elena's heart swelled at the simple victory. One evening, as the last light faded, Elena sat by the corral and played an old Willie Nelson song on her phone. The gentle strum of guitar, the low twang of the singer's voice drifted into the desert air. Ghost approached and stood beside her, head lowered, eyes half closed as if soaking in the piece. "You've got good taste, boy," Elena chuckled, reaching up to scratch his neck. Luna dozed at their feet. The world so quiet Elena could hear her own heartbeat, steady and strong. Yet it wasn't only peace she felt. Some nights, after the chores were done and the house was dark, Elena would sit by her window and watch the distant horizon, mind wandering. She thought of the storm, the barbed wire, the woman in gray with her hard eyes and vague threats. Those memories lingered, a reminder that their peace was hard-won and possibly temporary. But here in these small hours, Elena allowed herself to hope that this new life, this bond, might last. She found herself opening up in ways she hadn't since her husband passed. One afternoon, she set up her old camera and took a selfie with Ghost, laughing as he sniffed her hat and nearly knocked it off. She sent it to Ruth with a note. "Maybe it's time I started over. Ghost seems to think so." The next day, a package arrived. A box of herbal ointments, horse treats, and a handwritten card from an animal rescue group in Utah. The message read, "Thank you for standing up for those who can't speak for themselves. You're inspiring us all. Keep fighting the good fight." Elena pinned the card to the fridge. She realized she wasn't just healing Ghost. She was healing herself too, piece by piece, step by step. As summer stretched on, Elena dreamed of building a proper shelter for Ghost. maybe even welcoming more rescued animals if Ruth's network kept growing. She mapped out plans in her journal, sketching paddocks and haysheds, scribbling ideas for community events. Hope had crept in, silent and persistent, lighting up corners of her life she'd almost forgotten existed. One morning she woke before dawn and stepped outside just as the sky began to blush with light. Ghost stood at the fence, waiting. Elena ran her hand along his muzzle, feeling the warm breath against her palm. "Thank you for trusting me," she whispered, her voice rough with emotion. The world was still full of threats. Government agents, horse thieves, old memories that stung like open wounds. But now Elena knew she wasn't facing them alone. She had Ghost, she had Luna, she had Ruth, and the growing chorus of voices rallying behind her. Most importantly, she had her own resolve, stronger now than ever before. Together they watched the sun rise over the Nevada desert, two survivors forging a new life out of pain and hope. For the first time in years, Elena truly believed that anything was possible. The Nevada summer brought its own kind of restlessness. The air was thick with heat even after sunset, and the desert felt alive with hidden threats. Elena tried to keep the rhythms of her days gentle. Early mornings with Ghost, shared moments with Luna, routine phone calls with Ruth. But beneath the comfort of routine, an undercurrent of anxiety grew. She kept seeing the same battered sedan idling at the end of her driveway at dusk, its windows dark, engine rumbling quietly, never moving when she stared it down. Some nights, a pair of headlights would flicker across the far hills, only to vanish when she stepped onto the porch with her flashlight. Even Luna, ever watchful, slept with one ear up. The peace she and Ghost had built began to feel fragile. Every evening, Elena checked the locks on the barn doors and double-checked the latches on Ghost's corral. She set up motion-activated lights by the gate, their harsh glare casting long, jagged shadows across the sand. She even found herself sleeping with her old hunting rifle by the bed, something she hadn't done since the days after her husband died. It was late on a Thursday night, the kind of darkness that pressed up against the windows when it happened. Elena had just settled onto the couch with Luna dozing at her feet, letting her mind drift with the soft hum of a distant radio. The house was quiet except for the occasional creak of cooling wood. Outside, cicadas whirred, and the wind rattled a loose gutter. Suddenly, Luna leapt to her feet, barking, a sharp, frantic alarm that sent Elena's heart racing. She sprang up, grabbing her flashlight and rifle. Through the kitchen window, she saw movement, shadows slipping along the fence line, flashlights bobbing in the blackness. Her mouth went dry. Someone was out there, more than one. The memories of Agent Keller, the ominous phone calls, and the strange cars all slammed together in Elena's mind. She moved fast, every muscle tight with adrenaline. She whispered for Luna to stay, cracked the door, and slipped out onto the porch. The night was hot, air buzzing with tension. As she moved toward the barn, she could hear hushed voices, a curse, a nervous laugh, the metallic scrape of something against the old padlock. There were 3 of them, she realized. All wore black hoodies, faces masked with bandanas. They fumbled with the lock on Ghost's stall, clearly expecting the job to be quick. The Mustang inside was already in a frenzy, rearing and slamming against the stall door, his screams echoing across the night. Elena felt her hands shaking, but forced herself to breathe. She raised her rifle, aimed it high, and fired a warning shot into the sky. The sound shattered the night, thunderous, final. The men froze, heads snapping in her direction. "Get the hell away from my barn!" she shouted, her voice slicing through the darkness. "I'm calling the sheriff!" For a moment it was a standoff. The intruders glanced at one another, weighing their options. One of them stepped forward, trying to sound tough. "Lady, you got no idea what you're messing with. That horse ain't yours." Elena cut him off, cocking the rifle again. "Neither is my patience. Last warning, move." That did it. The men bolted, stumbling over the uneven ground, flashlight beams bobbing wildly as they raced for the fence. One caught his hoodie on the barbed wire and swore, tearing himself free. In less than a minute, they disappeared into the dark, engines roaring as their van tore away down the dirt road. The valley exploded with sound, dogs barking on distant ranches, lights flicking on in neighbors' windows, the phone ringing in the house. Elena sprinted to the barn, heart hammering, breath burning in her chest. Ghost was drenched in sweat, eyes wild with terror. His body slammed against the stall so hard the wooden boards creaked. "It's okay. It's okay. You're safe now." Elena spoke in a low, soothing tone, struggling to keep her hands steady as she unlatched the stall. Ghost shot past her, blowing through the door and out into the open night. He bolted straight through the corral gate, which the intruders had left ajar, and disappeared into the moonlit desert. "No!" Elena ran after him, but it was useless. Ghost was gone, limping but free, a white blur swallowed up by sagebrush and shadow. She stood there, chest heaving, anger and terror burning through her. Luna pressed against her leg, whining, as if to say, "You did everything you could." The sheriff arrived 10 minutes later, gravel crunching under his tires, lights flashing blue and red. He was a local, Deputy Roy Harmon, a man Elena had known since high school, with a tired face and a reassuring way of speaking. He listened as Elena described the intruders, her hands still trembling. "You say they tried to take the horse. Did they say who sent them?" "No names," Elena replied. "But they wanted Ghost bad, and they knew where to look." Harmon shook his head, jotting notes. "There's a lot of interest in wild horses these days. You'd be surprised. Money, politics, all kinds of people getting involved. I'll put out an alert. But you know how big this land is. He could be anywhere." "I have to find him," Elena said, her voice raw. "He's hurt and alone. If those men catch him..." "We'll do what we can," Harmon promised, but Elena heard the doubt in his voice. He glanced at the barn, then back at her. "You did good, Elena. You scared them off. But if you see or hear anything else, call me, not just Ruth." After the deputy left, Elena walked the fence line, flashlight beam trembling as she searched for signs of Ghost. She found tufts of white hair snagged on barbed wire, a few drops of blood glistening in the moonlight. She whispered his name, her voice carried away by the wind. Inside, she called Ruth, her words tumbling out in a rush. How Ghost had vanished. How close they'd come to losing everything. Ruth was fierce, her voice tight with anger. "They won't get far. The community's watching, and so am I. Don't give up. We'll get him back." Elena hung up, exhaustion settling deep in her bones. She slumped into the old rocking chair by the window, watching the desert swallow the last traces of the night's chaos. For the first time in weeks, the little house felt small, exposed, and terribly vulnerable. She stayed awake until dawn, the rifle across her knees, Luna at her feet. Out there, somewhere in the endless sprawl of Nevada desert, Ghost was running, wounded, hunted, but still free. Elena vowed not to rest until he was safe again. The fight had only just begun. The desert was waking up, but Elena hadn't slept at all. Dawn crept over the Nevada horizon, turning the sagebrush silver and casting long, trembling shadows across the battered barn. Her mind churned with images of the night before, the flashlights bobbing in the darkness, the intruder's shouts, Ghost's terrified eyes, his white body vanishing into the wilderness. She'd fought to keep him safe, and still, he was gone. She moved through the morning with robotic efficiency, coffee, bandaging the small cut on her palm, grabbing a battered backpack from her closet and stuffing it with first aid supplies, apples, carrots, a canteen of water, rope, and a faded map of the nearby valleys. She slipped on her boots, checked her old hunting rifle, and called Luna to her side. Ruth was the first call she made. The line was fuzzy, Ruth's voice thick with worry but full of resolve. "We'll find him, El. I'll get on the phone. Neighbors, animal control, even my nephew at the feed store. You're not alone in this." Elena nodded, staring out the kitchen window as the first heat waves shimmered off the sand. "He's out there, Ruth. I can feel it. But those men, what if they're still looking?" "Then we move faster," Ruth replied. "I'll keep you updated. You keep your phone on and check in every hour, you hear me?" Elena agreed, pocketed her phone, and stepped into the rising heat. She whistled for Luna, who bounded to her side, and together they climbed into the battered old Ford pickup. The engine coughed to life. Elena's hands tightened on the wheel as she rolled out onto the dirt track, eyes searching the ground for any sign of ghost. Hoofprints, a swath of flattened grass, a streak of white against the gray-green brush. The hours bled together as Elena searched. At every dry creek bed, she stopped and listened for the telltale sound of hooves, the nervous nicker of a wounded horse. She found evidence. Tufts of Ghost's white hair snagged on sage branches, deep imprints in the mud by a watering hole. Once she found a bloody smear on a flat rock, fresh enough to make her heart clench. Luna sniffed the air, nose working furiously, leading Elena in ever-widening circles. At noon, the heat grew oppressive, baking the truck's metal shell, but Elena pressed on. At one point, she spotted a small drone buzzing overhead, its mechanical eye glinting in the sunlight. She froze, crouching low beside Luna, watching as it swept the horizon, then vanished over the distant hills. "They're not giving up either," she thought grimly. By late afternoon, exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her. She pulled off the road near an abandoned ranch, dust swirling around her boots. With shaking hands, she poured water into her palm for Luna, then drank deeply herself. Just as she was about to give up hope, Luna started barking, sharp and insistent. Elena followed the dog's lead through the thorny brush, heart pounding. There, under the shade of a dying cottonwood, she found him. Ghost, sides heaving, a fresh cut on his leg, eyes rolling white with fear. For a moment, neither moved. Elena crouched low, murmuring the same gentle words she'd used to build trust weeks before. "It's me, boy. I'm here. I'm not leaving." Ghost snorted, ears flicking. His body trembled as Elena approached, arms outstretched. But this time he didn't run. He let her touch his neck, fingers tracing the slick line of sweat and blood. Luna circled, barking once, then settling quietly, as if sensing the gravity of the reunion. Elena fished an apple from her pocket, holding it out. Ghost sniffed, then took it with a shuddering breath. She inspected the wound, deep but not life-threatening. She washed it with water, hands shaking from relief and fear, and did her best to wrap it with gauze from her pack. "We need to move, boy," she whispered. "They'll be coming." As the sun dipped lower, Elena checked her phone. There were 3 missed calls from Ruth and a new message. "Got a tip. Men with a trailer seen heading east, talking about a bounty. Don't stay in one place too long. Call me." Elena's heart hammered. She weighed her options. Staying put was too risky. Returning home was out of the question. That left only one choice: keep moving. She led Ghost on foot at first, coaxing him with soft words and steady hands. The 3 of them, woman, horse, and dog, moved in the growing shadows, sticking to arroyos and patches of tall grass. Every so often, Elena stopped to check their back trail, eyes scanning for the glint of headlights or the shadow of another drone. As dusk settled, her phone buzzed again. Ruth's voice came through, urgent and low. "Elena, listen to me. Head for my place. Take the old service road by the riverbed. It's rough, but you'll stay out of sight. I'll meet you halfway, bring supplies. Just get Ghost here." Elena felt a surge of gratitude. Ruth's sanctuary ranch, tucked near the state border, was the safest place for Ghost now. She pulled out her map and traced the route. Rugged, winding, but doable if they kept moving. She led Ghost and Luna toward the riverbed, sweat soaking her shirt, the sting of fatigue in every muscle. The stars came out, sharp and endless overhead, and the coolness of night brought a second wind. They moved in silence, only the soft crunch of hooves and the distant yip of coyotes breaking the quiet. Halfway through the night, Elena heard an engine in the distance, low and predatory. She pressed herself and Ghost into the shadows, heart pounding as headlights swept the valley. The vehicle passed, too far to spot them, but close enough to remind Elena of the stakes. Every moment counted. At dawn, with her body aching and eyes gritty with exhaustion, Elena finally spotted the outline of Ruth's ranch on the horizon. A cluster of lights, the promise of safety. Relief warred with vigilance. She couldn't let her guard down, not yet. As they drew closer, Elena felt a strange mixture of hope and fear. She'd pushed herself to the limit, risked everything to save this Mustang who, against all odds, had become her family. But she also knew the fight wasn't over. The men who wanted Ghost would not give up easily, and the authorities with their vague threats and surveillance would not let this go. She stroked Ghost's neck as the sun rose, painting the sky in fiery streaks. "Almost there, boy. Just a little further. We've come this far. We're not giving up now." Together they pressed on, battered but unbroken, toward the promise of sanctuary, even as new threats gathered behind them in the waking desert. The dawn sky bled gold and scarlet as Elena and Ghost limped across the last stretch of desert toward Ruth's sanctuary ranch. Every step was hard-won. Elena's legs burned, her boots caked with mud and dust, and Ghost staggered on a wounded leg, sides heaving but eyes sharp and determined. Luna ran ahead, barking to announce their arrival, her fur bristling with exhaustion and fierce pride. The ranch lay just beyond a line of ancient cottonwoods, its barn roof shining in the rising sun. Elena felt hope flicker in her chest, a dangerous, precious thing. But as they drew closer, she noticed something wrong. A black SUV was parked by the gate, and two more vehicles, one a battered pickup, the other an unmarked white van, sat nearby, engines still ticking. Uniformed men stood in a loose semicircle at the entrance, their stance tense and practiced. Mixed in with them were a few plainclothes figures, some with phones out, recording or snapping photos. Elena's heart clenched. It was a trap, a last stand, right on the border of safety. She scanned the scene. Ruth, standing tall with her gray braids swinging over one shoulder, was flanked by two neighbors and a handful of young animal rescue volunteers. They held signs: "Protect wild mustangs," "No more secret seizures," "Justice for Ghost." A handful of other locals, phones in hand, streamed the scene live to social media. As Elena led Ghost forward, the tension thickened. A woman in a crisp gray suit, Agent Keller, stepped forward, flanked by two uniformed deputies and a burly man in jeans and a contractor's vest. "Miss Torres," Keller called, voice hard as steel, "you need to surrender that horse. He's a federally protected asset and must be returned to government custody immediately." Ruth stepped between them, her voice ringing out, calm but fierce. This animal isn't your property. He was injured, left to die, and rescued on private land. We have documentation, witnesses, and community support. Unless you have a lawful court order, you're not taking him anywhere. Keller brandished a sheaf of papers, waving them for the cameras. This is a federal matter, Ruth. Interfering with government business is a crime. But the crowd pushed closer, emboldened by their numbers and the glaring eyes of live-streaming phones. One of the neighbors, a stocky man with a sunburned face, called out, "You're not taking anything without a fight. We know our rights. Let's see a judge's signature, not just government bluff." Elena, heart-pounding, found her voice. "You threatened me in my home. You sent men in the night. If you really cared about Ghost, you would have sent a vet, not armed men and threats." Ghost, sensing the emotion in the air, snorted and stamped, pressing close to Elena's side. She stroked his neck, trying to keep them both calm. "He's hurt, but he's not alone anymore. And neither am I." Cameras zoomed in on the confrontation. Ruth raised her phone, live streaming on every platform she could. "The world is watching," she announced. "This is what government intimidation looks like, when ordinary people protect the voiceless and stand up to power." Keller's lips pressed into a thin line. She turned to the deputies, speaking low and urgent. They conferred, eyes darting to the crowd and the steadily rising viewer count on their phones. The contractor stepped forward, flexing his hands. "We have orders, ma'am. We can take the horse by force if we have to." "No, you won't," Ruth interrupted, her voice slicing through the tension. "There are witnesses. There are cameras. You want a lawsuit? Go ahead, try. But you'll answer for every move you make right here, right now." The standoff stretched, heavy as the desert sun. Elena felt every second crawl across her skin. She braced herself, ready to fight for Ghost, but also terrified. What if it wasn't enough? What if power and money and legal threats could still tear them apart? Then, from the far end of the crowd, a young woman in a rescue t-shirt called out, "We're trending online. Thousands of people are watching. Media's on their way." A ripple moved through the officials. Keller checked her phone, jaw tightening as notifications lit up her screen. The deputies shifted their weight, suddenly wary of becoming the story themselves. The contractor scowled, but no one made a move. Ruth, seizing the moment, raised her voice so everyone could hear. "You want transparency? Fine. Show us your orders. Let the press see what you're really about. Or let this horse and all the others like him find sanctuary where they belong." For a long moment, it felt as if time itself held its breath. The only sound was Ghost's heavy breathing, the soft flutter of the sanctuary's flag in the morning breeze. Finally, Keller turned, face pale with anger. "We'll be back, with proper authorization. Don't think this is over." She signaled to her team, and the SUVs backed away, gravel crunching under their tires as they retreated. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause, some hugging each other, others weeping with relief and triumph. Elena's knees nearly buckled with relief. She leaned against Ghost, burying her face in his mane as Luna barked and wagged. Sensing victory, Ruth rushed over, pulling Elena into a fierce hug. "You did it, Elle. We all did. You brought him home." "I couldn't have done it alone," Elena replied, voice shaking. "He's safe. At least for now." The volunteers streamed the moment online. Photos of Ghost standing proud, battered but defiant, Elena at his side. Ruth and the neighbors gathered around. Messages flooded in. Donations, offers of help, media requests. The sanctuary's phones rang off the hook. Yet, even in victory, Elena knew the fight wasn't truly over. But for the first time, she didn't feel isolated. She had Ghost, she had Ruth, and she had a community that refused to look away. As the sun climbed higher, the ranch filled with hope and laughter. Children petting Ghost, neighbors sharing food, volunteers building new fences and setting up tents for reporters. Ghost, still wary of strangers, pressed close to Elena but let others stroke his neck and whisper thanks. His wounds would take time to heal, but for the first time, safety seemed real. In the afterglow of the standoff, as the world watched and the story spread, Elena realized that courage wasn't just standing up for yourself. It was letting others stand with you, even when you were afraid. The battle had brought them all together, forging a new beginning out of the fires of adversity. And for one shining morning, beneath the Nevada sun, it felt like justice had finally found its home. The morning after the standoff, the world seemed to move at half speed, as if the ranch and everyone on it was holding its breath. For the first time in weeks, Elena awoke not to tension or fear, but to the gentle thrum of life at Ruth's sanctuary. Sunlight spilled across the worn kitchen floor. Outside, Elena could hear the chatter of volunteers, the soft lowing of calves, and the distant, steady rhythm of hammers as new fences went up. For Ghost, this new life felt almost as foreign as the wild chase that brought him here. The Mustang's wounds were healing, but his trust was hard-won. Elena made sure to be there for every step of his recovery. Early each morning, she walked the perimeter of the corral with him, hand on his warm, scarred shoulder, talking quietly about anything that might comfort him. The songs her mother used to sing, the sweet clover growing by the irrigation ditch, the way the mountains looked at sunset. Ruth's sanctuary was more than just a safe haven for horses. It was a lifeline for people, too. Every day, new faces arrived. A high school girl who wanted to learn about animal care, an older couple who brought fresh alfalfa, a woman who'd driven 5 hours just to stand at the fence and see Ghost in person. Some came bearing gifts, bandages, herbal ointments, feed. Others brought stories of their own struggles, the ways they'd stood up for lost things, or fought systems that seemed too big to change. Elena found herself swept into the current. She coordinated chores with Ruth, mended fences, led tours for curious children. She joined in meetings with animal welfare lawyers, reviewing the thick stack of legal papers Ruth's contacts had prepared. Ghost's case was now part of a broader battle. Attorneys from across the state were rallying to ensure his status as a protected animal in a registered sanctuary. Every paper was stamped, every form filed, every box checked with the careful thoroughness born of experience and necessity. But Ghost was always at the center of Elena's thoughts. He remained wary of strangers, sometimes pinning his ears or shying away from outstretched hands. Yet with Elena, something different grew, a quiet understanding. She became the constant in his day, the steady hand offering a treat or a gentle touch. When Ghost finally allowed a volunteer to approach, nuzzling a carrot from her palm, the moment was caught on video and went viral, a symbol of how patience could overcome even the deepest scars. The community event that Ruth and Elena organized became a rallying point. Flyers appeared across town. Wild Horse Protection Day, Meet Ghost, Learn, Celebrate, Defend. The ranch swelled with visitors, reporters, even local politicians eager to be photographed with the famous Mustang. Kids painted signs and handed out stickers. Team Ghost t-shirts sold out by noon, and Ruth's kitchen overflowed with donated food. There were speeches about wild horse protection, about justice and the power of ordinary people. Elena, who'd never liked public speaking, found herself in front of the crowd, voice shaking but proud as she shared the story, her story of risk, rescue, and standing up to power. "I'm not a hero," she told them. I'm just someone who couldn't walk away. When I found Ghost that night, tangled and bleeding, I realized he'd survived because he'd kept fighting. I think that's what we're all doing, in our own ways. We fight for the things we love, for the voiceless, for each other. Her words rippled through the crowd. Some wiped tears, others nodded in quiet solidarity. Ruth hugged her tight, murmuring, "You're braver than you think." The celebration was more than a party. It was a declaration. Local TV crews filmed interviews. The legal team gathered signatures for a petition demanding state and federal protection for all Mustangs. The mayor presented Elena and Ruth with a plaque, community heroes, protectors of the wild. But even as joy and relief blossomed around her, Elena knew the struggle was not over. Officials would return, maybe with more paperwork, maybe with more force. There were rumors of new laws being drafted, whispers about rehoming, or even selling wild Mustangs to distant bidders. Ruth's sanctuary, now a symbol of resistance, drew both admiration and resentment. Still, the good outweighed the fear. Ghost grew stronger every day, scars fading, coat shining in the summer sun. Elena watched him gallop the length of the corral, mane streaming, the memory of pain giving way to the promise of freedom. He let more people close now, especially the children, though he always looked for Elena, his anchor in this bewildering world. The sanctuary itself changed too. Neighbors who'd once kept to themselves now brought food or tools or just a friendly wave at the gate. Volunteers built new paddocks, mended barns, and designed flyers for future events. Elena could feel the community stitching itself tighter, one act of kindness at a time. One evening, as the sun dipped low and cast the ranch in golden light, Elena stood at the fence with Ruth, watching Ghost graze. Ruth passed her a mug of strong coffee and sighed contentedly. "We did something good here, Elle. More than just saving one horse. We reminded people that standing up matters." Elena smiled, running her hand along the rough wood. "I think he saved me too. I'd forgotten what hope felt like." They stood together in silence, watching Ghost nuzzle Luna and let a little girl stroke his side. The world beyond the sanctuary's borders was still full of threats, greed, bureaucracy, indifference. But here, for now, they'd carved out a corner of safety, a promise kept. Before heading inside, Elena sent a quick update to Ruth's followers, a photo of Ghost, head held high against the pink desert sky. The caption read, "He's safe, we're safe, and we're not done fighting for freedom." The post caught fire, hundreds of comments, words of encouragement, stories from around the country. Elena scrolled through them, heart swelling. She realized that what they'd built, this sanctuary, this fragile peace, wasn't just for Ghost or herself. It was for anyone who'd ever been lost or hurt or overlooked. For the first time in a long time, Elena let herself believe in happy endings, or at least in the possibility of them. Ghost was living proof that with enough courage, kindness, and stubborn love, even the wildest spirits could find a place to heal. As the stars blinked awake above the Nevada desert, Elena promised herself she would never stop fighting for that chance. Not for Ghost, not for any soul who needed sanctuary. Night came quietly to Ruth's sanctuary, settling over the Nevada desert in a velvet hush, broken only by the distant call of coyotes and the gentle stirring of horses in their stalls. Elena sat on the back porch, her boots propped on the railing, a battered journal open in her lap. Luna rested at her feet, snoring softly after a long day. Beyond the fence, Ghost moved like a pale ghost himself, calmer now, grazing peacefully, his wounds almost healed. Elena let her gaze linger on him, her thoughts swirling in the cool evening air. The past weeks replayed in her mind like a film. The lightning-lit storm, the bloody barbed wire, the sleepless nights, and the long, hard chase. She remembered the panic in Ghost's eyes, the threats at her gate, the impossible decision to risk everything for a creature that was never hers to claim. Each memory was edged with exhaustion, fear, and, above all, an overwhelming gratitude that they'd both survived. She reached for her pen, hands steady now, and began to write. Ghost's scars are not marks of shame. They're proof of survival, of battles fought and won, of courage in the face of cruelty. When I look at him, I see every moment we could have given up, but didn't. Her thoughts drifted to her own scars, the invisible ones she rarely let herself examine. She remembered the years of firefighting, bravery and adrenaline, yes, but also the loss that had left her reeling, the fire that took her husband and the dreams they'd shared. She'd come to the desert seeking solitude, a way to disappear into work and wind and the endless horizon. But it hadn't healed her, not really. It had just made her quieter, more wary, like Ghost himself. Until the night the storm broke, until fate delivered a wild mustang to her doorstep, demanding care and compassion even when it was easier to walk away. In saving him, she'd started to save herself. Elena smiled, watching Ghost lift his head and look back at her, as if he could feel her eyes on him. He stepped closer to the fence, the moonlight soft on his white coat. She set her journal aside and rose to meet him, the grass cool under her feet. Up close she could see every healed wound, the scars along his shoulder and flanks, the places where the hair grew in ragged. She rested her palm on his neck, feeling the steady, powerful life beneath her fingers. "We made it," she whispered, her voice lost in the night air. "You're safe. I'm safe. Maybe for the first time in a long time I feel free." She realized, standing there with Ghost, that her own healing had begun the night she'd chosen to fight for him. Not just in the physical struggle of cutting wire or fending off threats, but in the quiet, stubborn way she'd refused to let him be taken, refused to be intimidated, refused to back down when so many told her she should. She thought of Ruth, whose faith had never wavered, of the volunteers who had come and gone, their hands gentle and hopeful, of the community who'd rallied around a cause that started as a rescue but became so much more. She remembered every handshake, every meal shared, every late-night text and call. They'd all been changed by Ghost's fight. And Ghost, she saw him now not as a victim, but as a survivor. He was wary, yes, but also strong, smart, and slowly trusting. He'd learned to let himself be cared for, to accept help, to find peace where once there was only fear. In his eyes, she saw a spirit that could not be broken, no matter how many times life tried. That night, Elena sat with Ghost under the stars, stroking his mane and telling him her story, about love and loss, about the family she missed, about the hope that was slowly coming back. For the first time in years, she didn't feel alone in the telling. She found herself reflecting on bigger things, how survival is more than just making it through another day. It's choosing every day to reach out, to build trust, to stand up when others try to silence you. It's letting your scars show, not as proof of weakness, but as evidence of all you've overcome. Survival means letting the past shape you but not define you, she wrote in her journal later that night. It means finding reasons to hope, even when hope seems foolish. It means knowing your limits and pushing past them when it matters. Her thoughts turned to the bigger fight, the one still looming beyond the borders of the sanctuary. Wild horses across the country still faced threats from people with more power and money, from laws written to favor those who saw them as nothing more than assets or obstacles. Elena knew her story with Ghost was only one of many. But now, thanks to Ruth and the community, it was a story that others were starting to hear. Letters arrived daily, notes from children, donations from strangers, stories from people who had fought for their own lost causes. Elena answered as many as she could, sharing what she'd learned, that courage grows in unlikely places, and sometimes the smallest acts of defiance can change the world. She also found herself invited to speak at town halls, schools, even a regional conference on animal welfare. She dreaded public speaking, but she knew how important it was. She told the truth, unvarnished, about the cost of caring and the power of community. She ended each speech with the same lesson. Compassion and courage aren't easy, but they're worth everything. Ghost taught me that. Maybe he'll teach you too. On the eve of fall, Elena walked the pasture as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in shades of fire. Ghost followed her, steps slow and deliberate, his head bumping gently at her shoulder. She turned, laughing, and hugged his neck. In that moment, she understood the biggest lesson of all, that together they'd proven the world wrong. That survival, true survival, wasn't just about holding on, but about reaching out, standing tall, and claiming your place in the sun. As the stars blinked to life, Elena made a promise to Ghost, to herself, and to every wild thing fighting for freedom. We're not done yet, not by a long shot. The days grew shorter, and the Nevada air took on the crisp edge of autumn. Yet, at Ruth's sanctuary, the work never stopped. Elena moved with practiced purpose from sunrise to sunset, feeding, cleaning, teaching volunteers how to calm a skittish colt, and more often now, sharing Ghost's story with visitors who'd come from across the state just to see him. What began as a desperate rescue on a stormy night had become something bigger, a cause that reached far beyond one mustang, one woman, and one stretch of desert. Ghost thrived in his new home. His coat gleamed under the autumn sun, and he had grown bold enough to canter along the length of the pasture, his scars fading into lines of silver beneath the white. Children came in groups to watch him, some shyly reaching through the fence with treats, others whispering stories they'd made up about the bravest horse in Nevada. Ghost would approach, cautious but curious, accepting an apple or a gentle pat before retreating to the safety of his favorite shade tree. The mustang, who once bolted from every sound, was learning, slowly, that this peace was real. Elena felt herself changing too. She'd started taking small steps beyond the sanctuary, accepting invitations to speak at schools, local government meetings, and even on a regional radio show. Each time her hands shook and her heart pounded, but she told the story anyway, how she found Ghost, the threats they faced, and the extraordinary power of standing up for what was right. Every telling grew a little easier, her voice a little stronger, and after each event, she met people who shared their own stories, farmers, activists, teachers, even a pair of veterans who said Ghost's courage had reminded them to fight for the things that mattered. One day, a teacher from a nearby reservation brought her class to visit the sanctuary. As Elena walked with them along the paddocks, she explained how wild horses shaped the land and how Ghost's ordeal had become a symbol for animals and people alike, survivors who refused to be forgotten. The children listened with wide eyes, and when one girl asked, "What will happen to Ghost now?" Elena knelt beside her and smiled. "He'll live here, safe and free," Elena answered, "and we'll keep telling his story so no one ever forgets what it means to fight for freedom." That commitment rippled outward. Ruth's sanctuary flourished with new donations and volunteers. Thanks to the wave of attention, local lawmakers visited the ranch and pledged to review outdated wild horse management policies. News crews filmed follow-ups on Ghost, and animal rights groups began citing his case in campaigns across the region. There were still bureaucratic headaches and moments of fear, a letter now and then from federal authorities, or whispers that new roundups were planned. But Elena never faced them alone. Each time the community rallied, voices raised, letters written, support pouring in from places she'd never imagined. Ruth, ever the organizer, helped Elena and the legal team draft a new proposal, the Ghost Act, a piece of state legislation aimed at strengthening protections for wild horses and their habitats, increasing penalties for illegal roundups, and providing more funding for sanctuaries. The proposal gained momentum, fueled by news coverage and public testimony. Elena spoke before the state legislature, her voice trembling with emotion but never wavering. She told the truth, not just about Ghost, but about every animal and person who'd ever been silenced or overlooked. When the Ghost Act passed that winter, it was celebrated not just at the sanctuary, but in homes and schools all across Nevada. Elena and Ruth received a plaque from the governor, and Ghost, led out to a cheering crowd with a red ribbon in his mane, became a living symbol of hard-won justice. Yet, Elena knew the real legacy was quieter. It was in every rescued horse who arrived at the sanctuary and learned to trust again, in the kids who came back each year to help with chores and tell Ghost goodnight. In the moments, just before dusk, when she stood at the fence and felt a sense of peace she'd never thought possible. The fight, Elena realized, would never really be over. There would always be another challenge, another animal in need, another voice trying to be heard. But she was ready. She had found her place, not just as a caretaker, but as an advocate, a storyteller, a quiet force for change. She wrote late into the evenings, journaling the lessons of Ghost's journey, crafting talks for new volunteers, and replying to messages from strangers who'd been touched by their story. Her message was always the same. Real freedom is standing up for those who can't fight for themselves. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is protect the ones everyone else overlooks. You may be one person, but you can change the world for someone who needs you. One chilly December night, the sanctuary gathered for a celebration beneath strings of lights hung from the barn. Neighbors brought food, children sang songs, and Elena stood beside Ruth, watching as Ghost basked in gentle attention, ears flicking, mane shining, his eyes calm for the first time in memory. Luna nuzzled his side, and Elena, heart full, raised her cup in a toast. "To Ghost," she said, "and to every soul who never gave up." The crowd cheered. Elena's voice rose above them, carrying across the dark fields and echoing under the stars. "Thank you for standing with us. Like, share, and follow our story. Together, let's fight for every wild heart still waiting for freedom." The sanctuary lights glowed late into the night, and as Elena looked up at the endless Nevada sky, she knew that Ghost's legacy and hers would endure, a beacon of hope for all who dared to believe in second chances.